Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the It Depends Lessons in Technology Leadership podcast. I had a great summer break. I'm hoping all of you got a chance to relax in your summer and or winter, depending on where you live on the globe. It's always important, I think, and I've learned because I was a person who never took breaks, who never took extended vacations, who never took off time between roles. And I very late, learned the benefit of that and learned that it's good to actually take some time, recenter. So I did some of that this summer as we move forward. So obviously the podcast moving forward is going to be very different from the older episodes in that we're done with the book. We're not going to be going through the book. So that means every other week, going to be talking about different topics that come from you. Please send me your questions or ideas or things you want to know more about, or topics from other places as well. I hope to talk to more folks, but I'm not currently planning to make this an interview podcast only because there's a lot of them in the world. But I do know you like, because you've told me that you like hearing conversations as opposed to just me talking at you. And I appreciate that. So we'll be doing a little bit more of that coming up. Before we get into this episode, I want to point out for those of you who at this point are probably on the East Coast or in the greater New York City metropolitan area, Lead Dev New York is coming up next month, the middle of next month. And I'm speaking at Lead Dev this year. I'm also going to be on a panel at Leading Edge. So these are in New York City, middle of October. If you want to register for Lead Dev, I have a 25% off coupon, and it's Kevin25. So if you put that in at checkout, that should give you a 25% discount if you want to register for the Lead Dev conference. And if you do, please send me a note. Let me know. So I'd be happy to meet up with folks. I'll also be doing an office hours. That's part of the Lead Dev thing. So you can come by during my office hours during the conference and talk to me there, or you can ping me and set up a time to talk. Another change, while the old podcast website is still live and will continue to be updated, and that's podcast.itdependsbook.net. There's a new podcast website. I built this over the summer, and that is itdependspod.com. So if you want to share an episode, please check out itdependspod.com. So it's got all the old episodes on it, and that's where I'm going to be putting more of my focus and adding stuff there. So let's get into today's first topic, which is, what do you do with an unplanned career break? Now, it's a tough time in our industry. I've talked about that in prior episodes. I mentor folks who have been looking for work, some for multiple years now, and multiple people who've been looking for quite a long time, especially given that I'm generally mentoring more established folks, more senior folks, not exclusively, but generally. And so those kind of senior middle management roles oftentimes are actually pretty hard to find a new one, often. So I get the question more often, sadly, than I'd like about, what do I do? I've been out of work for 3 months, 6 months, a year. And there's a point where when you get interviews, people will start to ask, why have you been out of work for so long? It's a weird question because people should be knowing what's going on in the industry. It's becoming sadly pretty common that people are ending up looking for a job for a long time. But still, there's this weird perception often that if you haven't been working for a little while, that it's a you problem as opposed to the situation the industry's in. And unfortunately, sometimes that will color how they look at you. If you got the interview, that means they're at least willing to consider you. But there's some things I tell people who are in that situation or are newly laid off and don't have a good line on kind of a next role. So I'll give you just some of that advice here in case you are in that situation or in case you find yourself in the near future. And sadly, the layoffs are just continuing in the industry. So it's affecting a lot of folks. One thing, there's a sort of common wisdom of How do you account for this in your CV or your resume or on LinkedIn? Sometimes people put it as in like career break, and they'll say deliberately choosing to take a career break. And people do legitimately do that. So it's not completely weird, but you have to be very intentional in how you describe it. What are you doing with that time? How long are you planning to do it? If you're using that to account for time looking for work, I wouldn't do that for longer than 6 months, unless you are legitimately taking a career break. But even then, I would very much describe what you're using that time for as opposed to just career break, which I see all the time. I would put in some new technologies you're learning, some new things you're trying. So it shows that you aren't completely disconnecting from what's going on in the industry. Unfortunately, given the current hiring market, it is not a job seeker's market. Anything that you can do to differentiate yourself or show that you are still in it, still paying attention, still developing your skills or growing or getting deeper in some areas is going to be helpful, because it is sadly just so competitive right now. And so anything you can do to differentiate yourself or set yourself apart, but career break, just 2 words, is not going to cut it. Better than career break, unless you are, again, legitimately taking a career break, would be, honestly, start a consulting company, start a startup, so that it looks like you are still in the world. You have this opportunity of time and you're trying to see what you can do on your own and legitimately do that. It's hard, speaking as somebody who has a consultancy, it's hard to get one off the ground unless you're exceptionally well connected to begin with. And once you get it going, it's hard to keep it going. And if your real intent is to eventually be working full time again, you have to be very careful about the kind of contracts you take, because you need to maybe be able to spin off those if you find a full time role. That's a legitimate use of your time. It shows you're using your skills, or at least intending to use your skills. You can also be using that time, if you aren't finding consulting clients, to develop new skills or get new certifications or whatever that shows you're still in the world, that you're still paying attention, that you're still developing your skills, that you are becoming more valuable, even if you're not working, and that you're taking your career development seriously. If you want to do a startup, I would totally do it. The effort to build a startup, create a startup, is nothing more than creating a website and having an idea. And you may start building something. If you are a senior leader, kind of like me, who you're not looking for a developer job, still go build something. Because I have my consulting, I can do consulting and things, and that demonstrates I'm still in that leadership world. But if I was in that position, I would be absolutely trying to build a product. And no one's going to look at you having created a startup and then decided you really needed to get a job poorly, because most startups fail. And that also gives you something to talk about in the interview. Oh, I see that you've been doing your own startup. Tell me about the thing you built. And that lets you talk about new technologies or how you approach product development or all those kinds of things. And it's a much more concrete use of that interview time, but it's also showing that you're serious about continuing to develop your skills, continuing to do the work, as opposed to being unemployed. And yes, you're looking for work and you're networking and doing all those kinds of things, but you're not utilizing any of your kind of core skills. There's a fourth I'm happy to talk about. I used to suggest this a lot more to undergraduate students who are looking for their first role, which would be to contribute to open source projects. I think there's a value to that as well. If you're just joining into that world, though, you found yourself with a lot of time on your hands because you got laid off from a company or your company shuts down, and you decide to work on some open source projects. That's a great use of your time. It's a great use of your skills. The projects will appreciate it, and you may choose to do that. But a value there is if you become a key contributor to an open source project, you get to gain some notoriety in that project, which may then lead to possible jobs. because people who work at companies who leverage that open source software will get to know you and may want to hire you, or you may be able to turn that into a software development consulting role or something like that. So I do think it's a good use of that time. It helps you develop your skills, keeps you working in a team to develop software, which is great. If you're looking for a job in the world of professional software development, then I think you can do that, but maybe also try and build a product. And again, if you're not really serious about building a startup, it's okay. Build it anyway and continue to develop it as you look for work, and have it on your resume, have it on your LinkedIn, founder at Stealth or founder at whatever. And then in interviews, people will ask you about it. Are you ready to step away from it or whatever? Or you can be talking to the recruiters and telling them, yeah, I've been working on it, but I'm not sure it's going to work out. And I think probably I need to go back and get back to work, and I'll put this on the shelf and come back to it later or whatever. I think people will appreciate that you're trying to build commercial software. So those are my 4 different recommendations. Career break is a fine way to demark a period of time where you're not working. Just put in what you use that time for, as opposed to just saying career break, because you can turn that into a positive. Also, don't do it longer than 6 months unless you are legitimately taking longer than that, pre-planned. And then I would put it in at the beginning. So if anyone's looking at you, they can see, oh, you are taking a 1-year career break. You are 1 month into it. But then you're not looking for work. But if you are looking for work, but you're trying to figure out how to account for this amount of time, like 6 months, you can say the first 6 months were career break. That lets you kind of restart the entire job hunting process all over again. And so I was taking a career break. I'm looking for work again. But again, put what you use that time for and make it relevant to companies that might be interested in you. So that's number 1. Number 2, build a consultancy, create a consultancy. Try and get work. If you have a good network, that's a little bit easier. There's other ways to do it. And it's a good time if you have a lot of time to be working on your network, which is also good if you're looking for work. But that also shows that you are starting a business, you're in the game, you're still working, even if you're not working full-time for one company. If you find that you're 6 months into your consultancy, but you don't really have any clients you can talk about, because that'll come up in the interview, maybe then adjust to build a start. And that could even be part of your consultancy. You could say, well, I'm consulting for other people. I'm also building a product, but show that, oh, no, I'm building something. I'm building product. I'm still very much in the world. I'm trying to do something new. Anyone's going to look at that and think that's showing grit, that's showing seriousness, that's showing drive. It's also showing that you're using your skills and keeping your skills fresh. It gives you things to talk about, the things you've learned as part of building this new product, maybe things you hadn't learned at prior companies because you were constrained to the way they did things. So it gives you stuff to talk about in the interview. It's a pretty common thing. No one's going to look at it weird. So I like that one. You do then have to explain why you're looking for a job, even though you've got this startup. Again, we're talking about an extended time off. If you're 6 months or a year, it's a pretty common thing. Hey, I tried to start this company. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to work out. So I'm realizing I need to find a job. Make sure people know that you're not planning to side hustle while you are working a full-time job. Some companies are okay with that. Other companies aren't. I would tell folks, I think it's not going to work out, so I'm going to shelve it. But, while I'm waiting to find a new role, I'm continuing to work on it because I want to keep busy. And then the fourth thing is contribute to open source projects. Always a good thing to do, especially if you're a user of open source projects, which we all are. It's good to give back. That reason alone, it's good use of your time. However, it's not necessarily the best thing to put on a resume, like as an open source contributor, but it's better than leaving that blank. And I would say it's probably better than career break. Or that could be something you say, career break. One of the things I did was I was a contributor to this open source project that I really like. But if you do it for a while, where you can become known within that community, that's maybe even a way to find new work later. So those are the things that I generally tell people. I understand that other people may give other advice if you have things that you think instead, or things that you've done when you've had an unplanned career break because you got laid off or it was a tough time like now looking for work. Absolutely. Please email me about it and I will talk about it in the next episode, or I'll talk about it in the newsletter. You can do that by emailing me, contact@itdependsbook.net, or you can do that by contacting me on Blue Sky. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Blue Sky. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Instagram. I'm Kevin Goldsmith on Twitter, but to be fair, I don't read X almost ever anymore. LinkedIn, you can message me on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me that way as well, unless you're trying to sell me something. So this episode, we're going to do 2 topics. And I don't know if we're going to do this every time. We're going to do this time. I wanted to talk about that unplanned career break, but actually I had something else I wanted to talk about, which is a day in the life of a CTO. This is a question I get asked all the time. What is your day like? I may have talked about this a little bit before, just in the context that one of the problems of being a senior executive leader is you're pretty far away from the work, even in a smaller company. A lot of times, people that were in my team only see me maybe at the town halls or things like that, or because since COVID, I've only worked in remote companies. So it's not like you see me around the office or you see me in a meeting room. You really don't see me. So people often wonder in my own company, but certainly in the people I mentor who are looking to someday be a CTO, they don't really know what does a CTO do all day. So I get that question a lot. What does your day look like? And so I thought I'd talk about that a little bit, because not only do you not see it, but it's also probably hard to understand, maybe. So let's talk about what my days look like. For CTOs in my kind of role, and I've talked about this before, there are different CTOs. If I was the CTO of a 7,000 person company, my day would be completely different than my day is, where I'm a CTO in startups. I work generally in mid-stage startups. And so as a mid-stage startup CTO, I am doing a lot of executive stuff, like company executive stuff, but I'm still a little bit close to work where I may wade in on some things or participate or help drive projects more so than somebody who's working in a company with a lot more people, where they're only leveraging the middle managers that work for them for that kind of thing. So that's an important distinction, right? So if you're wondering what's a day in the life of an early stage CTO, having done early stage, I can tell you it's a lot more about coding. It's a lot more about managing individual developers. It's a lot more about coordinating projects and maybe acting as a program manager. Or when I did this, I was also the IT department. So I was doing also things like helping people with their laptops and things like that. You do whatever needs to be done because there's no one else to do it. And that was exhilarating. It was also not exactly where I felt like my skills were being utilized, having managed a couple hundred developers. So I generally don't do that anymore. Maybe someday I'll do it for my own company, but I'm probably not going to do it for somebody else's. I mostly prefer to be a middle stage. So when I'm talking about my day, it's a little bit different when I manage a couple hundred developers. I'm managing a smaller group today, but it's pretty consistent, I would say, for me at multiple companies, different cultures, different industries, or different parts of the software industry, but managing anywhere from 50 to 200 developers is, mostly the same. I know that if I was managing 500 developers, it would be different. So I'm not going to talk about that. I think that would be a lot more administration. And definitely, if I was responsible for 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 developers, it'd be a very, very different world. So I'm going to talk about my experience And just understand that smaller companies, more hands-on, bigger companies, less hands-on, if you're looking for a general rule. So in a day, and I'm thinking through this week for me and thinking about what I did all day, I'm going to have meetings. If you look at my calendar, I have lots of meetings. So I'm meeting with my direct reports, one-on-ones. Like if you're a manager, you do the same. The difference probably is that when I'm meeting with my one-on-ones, they are all managers or almost all managers. And some of them are manager of managers. And I'm probably less familiar day to day with what's going on in their teams. So there's probably a little bit more status than you might have if you were an engineering manager and you're in the team and you see the work being done. I see some of the work secondhand, but I definitely will end up using my one-on-ones for more status than you probably do. What's going on? What's happening here? I may be checking up on things because that 1 hour a week I'm going to have with these folks is going to be my opportunity to check in on specific things. Emergency things or highly important, urgent things we'll be checking on through like Slack or something midweek or whenever it needs to be done. But that hour in that week is not only my opportunity to mentor and help them grow and do all that career development, but it's also where I need to get informed about what's going on in their part of the organization. And it's also where they get an opportunity to ask me questions or if they're facing challenges. If you're a line manager, my one-on-ones are probably a lot more status than yours are. If you're a line manager and your one-on-ones are a lot of status, you're probably not doing them right. I'll just say that. Whereas for me, it's kind of critical. So there's a lot of one-on-one meetings with my directs. There's a lot of one-on-one meetings with my peers because we have other meetings that we're in. But oftentimes, if there is an issue between, say, engineering and marketing or engineering and finance, or I need approval for something, that in that one-on-one is where we cover that stuff. And it's my opportunity to make sure that my stakeholders, if I have stakeholders on projects that are in other parts of the company, I make sure that I hear from them what's going on. It's an opportunity for them to hear from me. If I'm a stakeholder for a project they're working on, same idea. So there's one-on-ones with my directs, one-on-ones with my peers. There's also skip level one-on-ones. So I generally try to do skip level one-on-ones with people in the organization. My organization is big enough, I can't do that with everybody, but where I try and certainly talk to the leads or the line managers who don't directly report to me or things like that so that I can hear from them. I always like checking in with agile coaches because they see stuff from across a lot of teams. So that'll happen a lot less frequently, but that ends up being a chunk of my week as well. I get status. I get to hear what's going on. I also get a chance to reinforce things. So if there's a culture change that I'm trying to drive or a new technology I'm trying to champion, that's my opportunity to do that as well in kind of one-on-one conversation. That'll be a significant chunk of my week. Then there are things like the team meetings, the executive team meeting where we sync on stuff and go through the numbers. And this is every company I've been in. We'll talk about how the company is performing. We'll talk about issues. We'll talk about planning. We'll talk about strategy, all that kind of thing. That's probably my most important meeting in the week is the executive team meeting because that is where a lot of tasks come from or a lot of things I need to pay attention come from, or that is my opportunity to communicate to my peers in mass about important things that are coming from my team. That's usually my longest meeting in the week. And that's been true, again, of every company I've been at as a CTO. So lots of meetings, in other words. And then there'll be project meetings if we're doing budget, which is part of my responsibilities. Like we'll have budget meetings and be going through some of that stuff. If HR is planning new training, I'll have meetings to talk about that. I'll probably have meetings with partners or potential partners on various things. One thing I should also say, because I've been in both B2B and B2C companies, my current company is a B2C company. In a B2B company, I would spend a lot more time with customers. That's a critical part because you don't have that many customers. You are trying to sell customers. And so I would be in lots of meetings with customers directly, with either current customers or with customers we were trying to close so that I could hear from them directly or they could see that I'm representing the company, which means we're taking their business seriously. In a B2C company, I do find opportunities to hear from customers, but of course, it's a very different situation. We're not going to customers individually and trying to convince them to buy the product. There's other ways to do that. In a B2B company, especially one as I've had with inside sales teams, I might be on several customer calls in a week. And that was a totally appropriate use of my time, both from the hearing what customers were saying, but also being able to represent the company and help convince a customer to buy our product. So that's an important distinction between like B2B and B2C. In a B2C product, especially like my current company where we have millions of customers, I may talk to one of our customers in various places, but that's not a regular part of my week, as in calling up customers directly. I think something that probably surprises a lot of people when I just went through everything, a lot of where I spend my time, very little of that probably sounded like engineering or technology. And in the meetings, I would say, no, very little of it is, or at least not in the low level. Part of those projects might be we're pushing a new architecture or there's a new technology I'm looking for the company to adopt. And I would be very involved in those kinds of things. But day to day, my team is of a size where me being in the nitty gritty every day, not a great use of my time because there are really smart people at my company who I trust very much to do that. And I know that if there are challenges, they will let me know and bring me in. But if I'm just waiting in for half an hour once a week, it's probably not a good use of my time. And I'm probably going to randomize people. So I'm generally involved at a high level and drop down if I need to. But there's so many smart people that in our company to handle the low level stuff. I mostly let them do it unless I see that it's getting off track. And then I might absolutely jump in. But still, my time is just going to be limited because of all the other things I have to do. So very much technology is in my title. And I'll talk a little bit more about how I'm interacting not only with the technology of the company, but also the technology of the larger world. The next thing I tend to use a lot of my time on, and depends very much on the culture of the company. So I've been in companies that have a really heavy meeting culture. Especially, I've seen this a lot in companies that were in the office and then moved to be remote. They don't know how to give up that face-to-face discussion time. They don't know how to be asynchronous. And usually people are in a time zone alignment where they can have lots of meetings. So they do. I've been in fully distributed companies where I'm booked with meetings every day. And when I was in the office, that was often the case as well. I would be booked in meetings all day long. And then anything that wasn't meetings would have to happen after 5, usually. In my current company, I'm very lucky in that we have been fully distributed since day one. So we actually have a pretty good remote first culture in that a lot of stuff is done asynchronously. We don't overdo it on meetings. And because we've been distributed from the beginning, the time zone spread of the company is such that a lot of folks that work for me that are in Europe, so my day, because I live on the West Coast of North America, my day starts relatively early, usually 8 a.m.-ish, sometimes 7. If I really want to meet with somebody who's based in Europe, and that's the only time I can do it in that day. Occasionally, I try not to, but that does happen. So I'll be pretty busy with my meetings between 8 a.m. and maybe 1, maybe 2 p.m. Sometimes later, if I'm meeting with folks on the West Coast, sometimes I'll meet with them later in the day. But the good part is generally after a certain part of the afternoon, I'm pretty free, which is unusual for me, not in most of the companies I've been in, where I'm usually fairly booked all day long. And one of the things that I get to do, because I have generally 2 to 3 to sometimes 4 hours in my work day, that actually gives me time to work on larger projects or work on things that I've struggled to work on in other companies. And that includes things like strategy. That includes like examining new technologies. That includes like talking to peers at other companies to find out how they're addressing some of the challenges we're addressing. Sometimes that includes coding. So I do still code. I don't often code on the product only because if I screw something up, which is possible, if I screw something up and I'm in like a budget meeting that I can't jump out of and I've caused an incident, then somebody else is cleaning up my mess, and I hate that idea. And if you listened to the episode on when does a manager stop coding, one of the things I talked about was my experience continuing to own tentpole features, but having to do my manager job and me being like the blocker for my team. So I'm definitely never picking up critical path things. But oftentimes, if there's a bug I notice and I'm like, I should just take care of this, or something comes up, maybe from one of the other exec team members, and I've got some time, or I can make some time, I'll often fix those kinds of things. I'm also building prototypes of new features or building prototypes using technology. And the benefit of those kinds of things is if it takes me longer than it should because I get busy doing other CTO job stuff that is more important, that's fine. Nobody's waiting on it. So I have built features for my current company, but I try generally not to do that. And there was no time pressure on that. And really what I did was build an advanced prototype of it and then worked with a team to take ownership of it so that they own it. Because if it was going to be 100% on me, if there's a real urgent thing, it sometimes has to wait because that's not my job. My job is being CTO and doing other stuff. Yeah, I still code, and that comes part of it. I'm trying out new technologies. I'm examining things for the company. I'm reviewing code. I'm thinking about looking at our tech debt, thinking about what we need to do for the future. So yeah, I probably do code daily, but not always for work. And honestly, some of the personal projects I work on in the evenings or weekends for fun is also kind of work because that's sometimes my opportunity to play with something new that may eventually end up at my company as well. But that's part of also because of the way my company works as distributed first. This is the first time I've really been able to do that as part of my day job, which is really valuable. How do I prioritize my time? So I've talked in the past about Eisenhower Matrix. I am a huge believer in Eisenhower Matrix ever since I learned about it by reading Stephen Covey a long time ago. And when I'm stressed, like I have a lot of stuff on my plate, and people ask me what's going on, I'll tell them like I'm Eisenhowering the crap out of things right now. And that's their way of knowing that anything that's not urgent, you're not going to hear about it for a little while. And that is the way I generally look at stuff. Urgent, timely. If it's urgent and timely, it gets done now. And that means not doing other things that people need me to do. And that's too bad. If there's something urgent and it's timely, I'm doing it right now. If there's something urgent, but there's time, I'm going to do it later. If there's something not urgent, but timely, I'm probably going to delegate it and give it to somebody else because there's other things to do. But what urgency is described as is sometimes what are the things that I uniquely have to contribute to? So an incident, generally, not urgent for me specifically. If I'm free, I'm going to be involved and I'm going to be paying attention. But if I'm busy, plenty of people in the company exceptionally good at handling incidents. It's important for me to know that it's going on. It's not important for me to necessarily be in the details unless it's something really, really serious. Then it probably reaches a level of urgency that I feel like I need to do it. But a single service down, I'm not paying attention to that usually unless I've got time, unless I'm free. Things for the exec team, things for the board, things for investors. Usually, if that's coming to me, that's going to be fairly timely. urgent, not necessarily. I'll check if I get a request from the board or I get a request from an investor. Hey, could you send us this thing or could you tell us about this? I usually check, hey, when do you need it by? Just so I know. And if they say next week, then I'll see what else I have going on. If there's something more important, if there isn't, I'll get to it right away because I want to respond quickly when I can. But if I've got more critical things, they may wait. And so if there's a personnel problem in the team, I'll probably be pretty involved in that pretty quick, especially if it's a direct report. If it's not a direct report, I'll probably be paying attention to it, very similar to an incident. I'll probably be paying attention to it, but waiting until somebody's coming to me to get my perspective on it or to get my approval on a decision. A lot of stuff I get from the exec team is usually date driven, like, hey, we want to have this, like a budget or a strategy or OKRs and that kind of thing. That'll usually be date driven and it's important, not necessarily urgent. So I don't want to be late, so I always get it done by the date, but I may delay sometimes. But generally, what are the urgent things? It's going to be exec team emergency issues, investor or board issues, and then issues within the team. But again, it's only because I have folks in the team who are adept at handling these problems, and they know if they need my help, they can reach out and I will prioritize it. After that comes all the normal day-to-day work, working on tech improvement projects, working on POCs myself or examining new technologies or meeting with vendors. I spend a lot of time meeting with vendors. Another thing that people wonder about, do I get involved in deep technology decisions? Absolutely. Do I get involved in kind of code level code reviews? Usually not, but I do actually sometimes if I have time, I'll help with code reviews because it just keeps me looking at the code and keeps me seeing what people are doing. Another question I get a lot is how do I keep time for strategic thinking or long-term thinking versus being in the whirlwind day-to-day? To be fair, that is something I have struggled with in prior roles. I talk a lot about it in the It Depends book in different chapters about owning your calendar and planning your time and things like that. And those techniques have really helped. I do block out time in my calendar. In my current company, because we have such a good asynchronous kind of culture, I don't have to do that as much. My afternoons are generally time I have where I can have really good focused time to work on strategy or to work through planning or whatever I need to do for the organization or to examine technologies or those kinds of things. When I was much more heavily scheduled, the only way I could do that would be to block time out, or occasionally things I would do would be to get out of the building so people couldn't even see me for a day and either go to a co-working space, or when I worked downtown Seattle, I would get on a ferry. There's ferries from downtown Seattle that are like a 90-minute ferry. So you can get on the ferry, 90 minutes one direction, get off the ferry, walk back on the ferry, 90 minutes back. And that's like a really nice break where pretty much no one can bug you, especially in the old days when they didn't have good Wi-Fi. So that was always a great time to get this kind of blocked off thinking time. These days, not as much of a problem, just since working remote, it's a little bit easier. There's less expectation to be able to reach you. It's always a challenge. I am very interrupt driven because at any moment of the day, something's going to happen. We're going to have a technology incident, or a vendor is going to have a problem, or a partner is going to have some sort of critical issue, or there's a personnel problem, or whatever, or just an urgent question from a board member or something like that. And then when that happens, I got to drop what I'm doing. I got to take care of that and then come back to whatever I was doing. That is a bit of a challenge, but that's also just the nature of the work. This is the first company I've been in where I don't have a full day of meetings. And that gives me just tremendous amounts of time to do a lot of the things I've always supposed to have been doing, but never had the time to do. Another question I get a lot, how do I stay visible and connected to the engineering team without micromanaging? That is hard. It's harder because we're distributed. So when I was in office or office first, co-located first kind of companies, I was visible because I was visible. People would see me, like I said, in the kitchen, in the conference room. Even if they weren't in the meeting, they would walk by the conference room, see me in there, see me in my office, see me working, and know that they could knock on the door. And when I managed, which I have many times, managed remote teams, like in a different company office, I would make a point always of visiting those offices regularly and spending a couple days with them so that they did have access to me and they could talk to me and they were connected to me. And that worked even when I had teams in Stockholm, Gothenburg, New York, and Boston. It was a lot of work on my part because that involved making a point of spending time in those places. I just try and stay visible as much as I can, participate in discussions. We have town halls. I do skip level one-on-ones. People know that if they want to talk to me, I'm always available to them. I try and reach out and let folks know if I hear about something good they've done or whatever. I let them know so that they hear from me directly on a regular basis. So it's hard. I'm not going to say it's easy. It's definitely hard. Another question I get a lot is how much of my time is outward facing versus inward facing. So talking to partners, customers, investors versus talking to my own team or my peers. If you're familiar with Patrick Lencioni, he's written 5 Dysfunctions of the Team. Among other books, he has a notion of first team. Who's your first team and who's your second team? My first team is really the executive team. So it's my job to represent technology in that group. If I didn't do it, then that would be bad for the company. So certainly most of my focus is on the executive team. My second team would be my technology leadership team. So my direct reports and to an extent, some of the folks that report to my direct report. And that's hours wise, partially just because of one-on-ones and stuff. I probably spend more hours with them. But, that my first team is definitely the exec team. Like I said, when I've been in B2B companies, I spent a lot of my time outward, both meeting with customers, working with the sales team. It was much more important for me to be doing more conference talks, being visible, because that was part of our branding. When I've been in rapidly scaling companies where we're hiring a lot, I also spend a lot of my time facing outward because I'm doing employer branding. So that means like going to meetups and going to conferences and giving conference talks and writing blogs or recording videos or whatever, because I'm trying to make sure my company is seen as a relevant employer because we're trying to attract people to work at the company. In a B2C company, that's a little bit less critical, or not a hyperscaling kind of business, that's a little bit less critical. And so you don't see me giving as many talks these days, just because that's not as critical for my job. We're a technology company in the music space. So me speaking at a tech conference, beyond whatever musicians happen to be in the room, is not really getting us customers. So I'm not doing as many of those talks. I do them still because I enjoy them and because I want to share knowledge like this podcast and like the newsletter, but it's not as critical as a part of my job as it was when I was in fast growing companies or B2B companies where I'm trying to get more customers or trying to drive more business or just marketing at some level. So this is a long one. The first time back, a lot of stuff built up. I wanted to cover 2 topics today because one was short, one's longer. But I'm hoping that you got some value out of this. I'm hoping you liking the new format. Again, if you want to attend Lead Dev, October 15th and 16th in New York City, I'll be speaking there. You can use the code Kevin25 at checkout on your tickets to get 25% off. If you want to support the podcast, please like it, share it, rate it, all that normal stuff. But also, if you want to support the podcast and you haven't bought my book already, buy my book. It's on Amazon. It's pretty much everywhere in the world. You can buy it hardcover, softcover, electronic book, audiobook, available on Spotify, Audible, all the normal places. To find links to all those places, go to itdependsbook.net. And if you want to share episodes from the podcast, go to itdependspod.com. So I hope this has been valuable for you. I know it's a long one for me. Maybe future ones will try and keep it shorter, maybe only cover one topic. But it's been a while. I missed y'all. So see you next week in the newsletter, and I'll see you back here in 2 weeks on the podcast. Have a great week. Thanks so much for listening. Please, again, subscribe, rate, share episodes of this podcast on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for Answers to April for the music used in this podcast. To hear more from Answers to April, visit answerstoapril.com. This podcast is a production of Unit Circle Media.